The storm tore through Bitter Creek like a vengeful god, rain lashing the pines, thunder cracking the sky. Elena Marlowe rode hard, her black stallion shadow cutting through the deluge. Her thighs gripped the saddle, the short riding skirt hiked up, soaked fabric clinging to her curves. Her long brown hair whipped wild, plastered to her flushed cheeks, gray eyes burning with secrets. A flash of lightning caught the dagger strapped to her thigh, its carved handle gleaming like a promise or a curse. Her breath came fast, lips parted as she leaned low, urging shadow faster, away from the hoofbeats chasing her through the dark. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Not when the past was so close, its claws grazing her heels. A bloodstain, faint and dry, marked her sleeve, a silent scream of what she'd fled. The cabin of Jonas Hale loomed ahead, a lone flicker of light in the wilderness. A man who'd sworn off the world. A man who didn't know she was coming. Could he turn her away, this woman carved from storm and shadow? Or would she unravel the walls he'd built around his broken heart? If this tale of desire and danger pulls you in, let us know where you're listening from in the comments. Like, subscribe, and ride with us through the wilds of Bitter Creek. The storm clawed at Bitter Creek, rain hammering the pines, wind howling like a wronged spirit. Jonas Hale sat alone in his cedar cabin, carving a pine block with a small knife, each cut sharp, deliberate, slicing away the world. A frame lay face down on the table, its secrets buried, safe from his green eyes, hard as frost on iron. He'd built this solitude after blood took his wife and son, a bounty hunter's mistake that broke him. No one came here. No one dared. Then came the knock, fierce as the thunder. Jonas gripped his knife, old instincts flaring, and cracked the door. Rain spat inside, and there stood Elena Marlowe, soaked, shivering, her riding skirt plastered to her thighs, the wet fabric tracing every curve. Her brown hair clung to her cheeks, gray eyes burning with defiance and desperation. "Please," she rasped, lips trembling from cold or fear. "Just till the storm passes." He wanted to slam the door, to keep his world sealed from her wild beauty, from the trouble she carried like a shadow. But her breath hitched, her body trembling, and something in her gaze, raw, unbroken, cracked his resolve. He stepped aside, jaw clenched, and she slipped past, her shoulder brushing his chest, leaving a spark of warmth that lingered too long. She stood by the fire, wringing her hair, droplets sizzling on the hearth. Her blouse, near transparent from the rain, clung to the swell of her breasts, the dip of her waist. Jonas turned to the kettle, his hands clumsy, her presence heavy as the storm. "Don't touch anything," he muttered, voice rough as gravel. She nodded, but her fingers grazed the table, hovering near the frame. His hand shot out, snatching it away. "I said don't." His voice was sharp, a wall thrown up against her. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of defiance. "You always this kind to half-drowned strangers?" "Never had one show up," he shot back, but his gaze betrayed him, lingering on her lips, full and still wet from the rain. He turned to the fire, cursing the heat creeping up his spine. Morning came, the storm unyielding. Elena stayed, moving with quiet purpose, tending the horse, mending a saddle strap with clumsy hands. She burned the bread, her laugh soft, unguarded, and Jonas's mouth twitched, a traitor to his solitude. He showed her how to knot the strap, his calloused fingers brushing hers. Her skin was soft, warm, and he pulled back like he'd touched a live coal. She didn't flinch, just watched him, her breath catching, gray eyes searching for something he wasn't ready to give. That night, she found an old book on his shelf, poetry from a life he'd left behind. Her voice, low and steady, read a line about love lost to time. The words cut deep, stirring memories of laughter he'd buried. He wanted to snap at her, to silence the ache, but her voice wove around him, soft and dangerous, pulling him toward a ledge he'd sworn to avoid. "Stop," he said, quieter than he meant, his hand gripping the knife harder. She closed the book, her fingers lingering on the worn cover. "You keep it, but you don't read it," she said, not a question. Her gaze held his, bold and gentle, and for a moment, the cabin felt too small, the air too thick. He stood, turning to the window, the storm's roar a mirror to the chaos she'd stirred inside him. She was a stranger, a risk, but her presence lingered, a spark in the dark he couldn't ignore. The storm held Bitter Creek in its grip, days bleeding into each other. The cabin a fragile fortress against the rain. Elena moved through Jonas's world, like a shadow he couldn't shake, her presence a quiet challenge to his solitude. She hauled water from the creek, her blouse slipping as she bent, the morning light tracing the curve of her back, her hips swaying with each step. Jonas looked away, carving harder into the pine block, the knife's rhythm a futile shield against the hunger stirring in his chest. He'd sworn off wanting, but she was unraveling him, thread by thread. They worked together outside, repairing a fence in the biting wind. Her hair broke free from its tie, and she reached up, fingers grazing her neck, revealing a faint scar across her wrist, a whisper of a past she hadn't shared. Jonas's eyes lingered, a question burning he didn't voice. She caught his stare, her lips parting, breath visible in the cold. "You look at me like I'm trouble," she said, voice low, teasing, her gray eyes daring him to answer. "'Cause you are," he replied, stepping closer to steady the fence post. His arm brushed her side, her warmth seeping through his sleeve, electric. She didn't pull away, her gaze locking with his, bold and searching, like she could see the man he'd buried. His pulse hammered, and he muttered about checking the horses, retreating from the pull of her nearness. That night, the fire cast shadows across the cabin, the air thick with unspoken things. Elena sat close, her knee grazing his as she stirred the coals. Her blouse, half unbuttoned from the day's work, slipped, revealing the soft curve of her chest, firelight dancing across her skin. Jonas's throat tightened, his fingers itching to trace her. He reached for the poker, their hands brushing, his rough, hers smooth, a spark that stopped his breath. She leaned closer, her lips inches from his, her scent, rain and leather, flooding his senses. His hand hovered near her waist, aching to pull her in, to surrender to the heat building between them. Her fingers grazed his jaw, soft but sure, and he leaned toward her, heart pounding, the world narrowing to her breath, her warmth, her eyes. A glint caught his eye, the dusty child's shoe in the corner, a ghost of his son's laughter. Guilt crashed over him like a wave, drowning the desire. He pulled back, chest heaving, voice hoarse. "You don't belong here." The words were for him as much as her, a desperate anchor to his vows. Her eyes flashed, hurt, then steel. "Maybe I don't," she said, standing, her silhouette sharp against the fire. "But I'm here now." Before he could answer, a sharp crack split the night. Not thunder, but something deliberate, close. Jonas grabbed his rifle, senses razor sharp, the old bounty hunter waking. He eased to the window, rain blurring the dark. Near the corral, a knife gleamed, stuck in a post, wrapped with a handkerchief bearing a horseshoe brand. Elena's face drained of color, her hand clutching the dagger at her thigh, its carved handle tight in her grip. "They found me," she whispered, voice steady but laced with fear. "Who?" Jonas demanded, his past roaring back, the weight of his rifle familiar, heavy. "Colt Maddox," she said, eyes haunted. "I ran from his gang, took a letter from my mother. Her last words, not his gold. He won't stop." Her hand trembled, but her jaw was set, a woman forged in defiance. Jonas knew that brand. Colt, a ghost from his hunting days, a killer who'd slipped his grasp. The storm wasn't the only thing closing in now. The cabin, once his sanctuary, felt like a trap, and Elena's presence, her danger, her warmth, was a fire he couldn't extinguish. He checked the rifle's chamber, his eyes meeting hers, a silent vow forming in the dark. Whatever came, he wouldn't let her face it alone. The cabin held its breath, the air sharp as a drawn blade. Jonas stood by the window, rifle in hand, his green eyes scanning the rain-soaked dark. The horseshoe-branded knife outside was a warning. Colt Maddox was close, his shadow creeping nearer with every gust. Elena sat by the fire, her dagger clutched tight, its carved handle catching the light. Jonas forced his gaze back to the night, but her presence burned, a flame he couldn't douse. "They'll come at dawn," she said, voice low, certain. "Colt doesn't wait." He nodded, the old bounty hunter stirring inside him. Colt, a name from a life he'd buried, a killer he'd chased and lost. "You should have told me," he said, anger laced with something softer, a pull he couldn't name. "I didn't want your blood on my hands," she replied, stepping closer. Her fingers brushed his arm, a fleeting touch that seared. "You've got enough ghosts, Jonas." Her words cut deep, stirring the ache of his wife's smile, his son's laugh. He wanted to push her away, to keep his walls intact, but her gray eyes held him, raw and fearless. The fire crackled, and he reached out, his rough fingers grazing her cheek, her skin soft, warm. She leaned into him, lips parting, her breath warm against his jaw. His hand slid to her hips, pulling her close, the curve of her body fitting against him, her scent, leather and rain, drowning his senses. Her fingers tugged at his shirt, nails grazing his chest, and he groaned, lost in the heat, the need. Her lips hovered near his, a whisper away, and he tilted her chin, ready to surrender. The frame on the table gleamed, its hidden faces screaming of guilt. His wife, his boy, dead because of him. He froze, heart pounding, and stepped back, voice raw. "I can't do this." His words were a plea, a chain binding him to the past. Elena's eyes flashed with hurt, then resolve. "Then keep me alive," she said, her voice steady, a spark of defiance in the dark. Dawn broke cold, rain a relentless curtain. Shadows moved beyond the trees, Colt's men circling like wolves. Jonas took position by the window, rifle steady, while Elena loaded the Winchester, her hands sure despite the tremor in her breath. The first shot splintered the doorframe, a violent crack in the quiet. Jonas fired back, dropping a man in the mud, his old instincts sharp. He slipped outside, luring two more toward the rocks, using the terrain like a weapon. A bullet grazed his shoulder, blood soaking his shirt, but he gritted his teeth, firing again, another body falling. Elena shouted his name, dragging him back inside, her hands shaking as she tore his sleeve to bind the wound. Her fingers lingered on his skin, her touch firm, yet tender, her eyes fierce with something deeper than fear. "Stay alive," she whispered, her breath warm against his cheek, her body close as she worked, the curve of her hips brushing his side. She grabbed the Winchester, taking position at the window, her frame taut, the soaked fabric of her skirt hugging her thighs. Each shot she fired was precise, a woman forged in survival. Colt himself charged through the rain, his face twisted with rage, a pistol in each hand. Elena faced him, Winchester raised, her body steady, but her eyes flickering with memory. Days of captivity, his twisted obsession. She hesitated, the rifle wavering, her breath catching as Colt's voice cut through the storm. "You're mine, Elena. Always were." Jonas staggered to his feet, blood dripping, rifle in hand. The cabin was a cage, the storm a shroud, and Colt's men closed in, their shadows dark against the dawn. Elena's finger tightened on the trigger, her heart a war between fear and defiance. Jonas's eyes met hers, a silent vow. He'd fight for her, even if it meant facing his own ghosts. The next shot would change everything, but whose blood would stain the rain? Rain lashed the cabin, a relentless shroud over Bitter Creek. Elena stood at the window, Winchester raised, her gray eyes locked on Colt Maddox, his twisted snarl cutting through the storm. Jonas, blood seeping from his shoulder, gripped his rifle, his green eyes fierce with a vow he hadn't spoken. Colt's voice taunted, "You're mine, Elena." But her finger tightened on the trigger, memories of captivity burning in her chest. She fired. The bullet struck Colt's chest and he staggered, collapsing into the mud, rain washing his blood into the earth. Jonas lurched forward, firing at the last of Colt's men, his shots precise despite the pain. The final shadow fell, and silence swallowed the gunfire, leaving only the storm's roar. Elena dropped the rifle, her knees buckling, and Jonas caught her, his hands firm on her waist, her warmth anchoring him. Her fingers clutched his shirt, nails grazing his chest, and for a moment, their breaths mingled, her lips close, her eyes raw with relief and something deeper. He wanted to pull her closer, to lose himself in her, but the blood on his hands, his, Colt's, his past, held him back. Inside, by the dying fire, Elena spoke, voice soft but unbroken. "I took a letter from my mother," she said, pulling the worn paper from her pocket. Her last words, "You're free, Elena." I ran to believe it. Her eyes met his, vulnerable yet fierce, and Jonas felt his walls crumble. "I thought I'd lost my chance at freedom," he said, voice rough. "Thought I didn't deserve it. But you." He handed her his carving knife, its handle worn from years of grief, a quiet offering. "Stay." She took it, her fingers brushing his, a spark in the dark. Her lips curved, not a smile, but a promise, and she leaned closer, her breath warm against his neck, the curve of her hips pressing against him. The firelight danced across her skin, and he let himself feel her, the weight of her body a redemption he hadn't sought. They stood there, two souls scarred but unbroken, finding solace in the quiet between storms. Morning came, the rain easing to a drizzle. Outside, they found a bloodied handkerchief in the mud, its horseshoe brand stark, Colt's mark, a whisper he wasn't dead. Elena's hand tightened on the dagger at her thigh, her silhouette sharp against the dawn, the wet fabric of her skirt tracing her thighs. Jonas stood beside her, his shoulder bandaged, his rifle ready. They shared a glance, her gray eyes meeting his green, a bond forged in blood and fire. The danger lingered, but so did they, together. They saddled Shadow, their hands brushing as they tied the straps, slow and sure, a rhythm born of trust. The cabin stood behind them, its door open, a threshold to a new path. The horizon stretched wide, a road of dust and promise, and in that moment Jonas knew he'd fight for her, for them, whatever came next. If this tale of storm and salvation stirred your heart, drop a like, share where you're listening from in the comments, and subscribe for more stories of the wild frontier. A super thanks keeps these tales alive, carrying us through the dust and danger. Ride with us again. Out where the heart meets the horizon,